So I just started the recording. Welcome, everyone. I'm Catherine Wygant Fawcett, the Executive Director of the Institute for Family-Owned Business. Thank you to Barry Dunn for being our presenting sponsor today. There's Seth. He'll speak with us in a few minutes. Thank you to the Portland Press Herald and the University of Maine Graduate and Professional Center for sponsoring us today. As many of you know, the IFOB is a nonprofit that helps family businesses succeed. We typically offer 50 programs ranging from our awards to our educational and our social events. We work with CEOs, we work with women in family business, we work with the next generation and leaders in transition. We've adapted our programs this year to go online and some in person. And if you were on earlier just now, you heard Greg and I chatting about our women's wine and nine and golf scramble. So we had over 100 people playing on that on Tuesday, which was great. Educational program will be a Zoom webinar, which will be on succession planning. We do that every year. It'll be October 29th from 8:30 to 10 a.m. We'll have Jim Lyon from Summit 9 Consulting talking about transition from Bob Goudreau, founder of Hardy Pond Construction, to his daughter, Deirdre Wadsworth, president of Hardy Pond Construction. You can register for that on our website at fambusiness.org. To fulfill our mission to support family-owned businesses, the IFOB board and staff are offering free family business memberships for the remainder of 2020, and we've opened up our affinity groups. So we hope you'll join us, and you can reach out to me to sign up or go on our website. We've muted everyone and turned off your videos, although you'll see who's in the room sort of here. And that's so that we can hear our great speakers. We'll also be recording the program for later viewing. We want to make it interactive, so if you have any questions, please go into the chat and hit it with everyone so we can see and get to your questions. We did this program 5 years ago in person, and today we're happy to bring this to you remotely and welcome a nationwide audience. We have Steve Tenney, founding partner and CEO of Great Diamond Partners, who is one of our board members and the moderator of this program. We also welcome our IFOB board chair, Lindsay Skilling, CEO of Giffords Ice Cream. We have Greg Sweetser, president of Sweetser Apple Barrel and Orchards. We have Tony Sherman, president and CEO of Jasper Wyman and Son, and Joanne Lance, CEO of Geiger, and Paul, CFO of Hancock Lumber. Towards the end of the program, we'll be putting a link to a survey in the chat because we really appreciate your feedback. And now I'll turn it over to our presenting sponsor and board member, Seth Weather, to say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And Catherine and Stephen, thank you for the opportunity to be a sponsor for this fantastic event. Barry Dunn is an accounting, consulting, and tax services firm based in Portland, Maine. We were founded in 1974, which typically sounds pretty impressive unless you're comparing it to fifth generation family-owned businesses, which we are today. Barry Dunn has a simple mission. We help our clients create, grow, and protect value. I'm the lead of the Valuation Services Group, so I get to work with privately held business owners each and every day. And there's so many different issues that privately owned business owners have. Greg was talking about some of them earlier today. He said, you know, if you have a business, you know that there is no such thing as a slow time. It's just always busy. So we're just so pleased that we get to work with some of you folks. We're so pleased to be here and be part of IFOB and be able to sponsor this event. I'd like to introduce to you today's moderator. Like myself, Steve Tenney is a fellow certified exit planning advisor. Steve, more importantly, is the CEO and co-founder of Great Diamond Partners in Portland. As an exit planning advisor, he helps business owners determine the best exit strategy, then collaborates with fellow experts to get the job done. As a fellow Institute board member, Steve is focused on delivering great content to his members in an entertaining way. So with that, Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Seth and Catherine, and welcome everybody. Imagine getting a nugget of wisdom that changes your career, changes your company in a really meaningful way. That's what happened 5 years ago when I first met Kevin Hancock from Hancock Lumber. He told me that he learned to make himself less important. And that bit of advice has changed my role at Great Diamond Partners and has been a key bit of advice as I engage with other business leaders. Making yourself less important empowers your employees. It allows you to focus on your unique ability. And as Seth would attest, it improves the valuation of your company. My hope today is that each of you find that nugget of wisdom that changes your career and your company. And to do that, we're going to hear from 5 great business leaders. I interviewed each of them and selected what I subjectively thought was the best material. We're going to bounce around quite a bit. So we're going to keep you on your toes. We're going to keep the panelists on their toes as we go around to a number of different subjects. At roughly 9:45, we'll have time for the audience Q&A using the chat box on your screen. And with that as an introduction, let's jump right in. We're going to start by talking about some succession planning and start with Greg. Greg Sweetser, as Catherine said, is president and 5th generation to own Sweetser's Apple Barrel and Orchard, selling 50 varieties of delicious apples every year. I also learned this morning that every week now he is selling 5,000 pounds of pumpkins, which is now their #3 product. Greg, in 2000, you and your wife, Debbie, bought the farm and the business from your parents. You also have 2 siblings. Why did you step up and effectively narrow the family ownership tree?
Well, good morning, Steve. Thank you so much. And, you know, we've seen a lot of businesses around the country and understand that everybody has their opinion and input. And we were very lucky. We have a very close family. And when my dad was to the point of wanting a 15-year plan, when he was in his 60s, we all thought about the future of the farm and the orchard and the legacy of the family. And my wife and I certainly had interest in operating it. You know, it is a seasonal business. It is a hobby. We only have 1,000 apple trees in the backyard, so that's pretty small compared to some of the big orchards around. And we both had careers. I was in the ski business and my wife is a nurse practitioner. So we were able to sit with our family and talk about the operation, and Debbie and I knew that we really wanted to be the decision makers. And in those early discussions, we were very frank about that. And, you know, having a seasonal hobby business like this, it was like, does anybody in the family have an incredible passion to operate this business? My sister lives up in Greenville. My brother was busy with his career. So it just worked out that it was good timing for me to really take over the business. And we were upfront that we did want to narrow the ownership tree. I was in partnership with my parents. We had created an LLC, and over an 8-year period, we transferred ownership portion to me until I actually took 100% ownership. But I think it was those frank discussions at the beginning that made it very easy for us to do that. And I'm not sure that every family has that ability. It's worked well. You know, like many of us, we're decision makers, and I like to make the decisions and move forward. Now, that being said, I like what you just said about Kevin Hancock and make yourself less important. I think that's a great lesson, because I do need to bounce off ideas off of other people. As many of you know, my wife passed away, so I've really lost my sounding board, which makes things very, very different today. Now I don't really like making every single decision. I mean, it's a burden. I mean, it's from 5 in the morning till midnight. I got to make all those decisions, and I wish I could let somebody else make a few. And maybe that's part of my growth in the business, is transferring some of that capacity.
So you mentioned early preparation, early discussions were really important, and that leads us perfectly over to Joanne at Geiger Corp. Joanne is CEO of Geiger Corp, which was founded in 1878 and is the largest privately held promotional products distributor in the world. Joanne, your predecessor was, or is, one of my heroes, one of my mentors. He currently owns, Gene currently owns the company with his brother. And Gene's son, David, is Geiger's general counsel and heir apparent. How are you and the management team grooming David?
Well, thank you, Steve, for helping me participate in this event. And I'm already picking up information from Greg and some of the other panelists just even prior to this call. David Geiger is our general counsel. He's fifth generation of the business. And depending on your perspective, he's either in his early 30s year young or 30s year old, because as a family member, he's been in the business as long as he can remember. We have an executive team that comprised of 3 other individuals and myself. And David was promoted into the executive team about a year ago. He earned that position based on his contributions in the company. And we have all assumed the role of helping him as he continues on with his role in the business. General counsel is such a perfect role for a family member because he's involved in everything that's difficult. You don't involve your general counsel when something's easy or when there's an easy decision. It's when it's a tough decision. And so just by virtue of his going off on his own to law school during a sabbatical and coming back, he is completely immersed in all of the complicated machinations of the business. We've also working with an executive coach that's been helping David. Our executive team is working with the coach, and the coach is working one-on-one with David as well. And he is so open to feedback that it's been a wonderful process for him. And he is just a terrific young person. Gene is also my mentor, and I can see so many of the great things in Gene, Gene in David, plus a whole lot more from his own skill and person.
Yeah. Moving over to Lindsay. Lindsay Gifford Skilling is the CEO of Gifford's Ice Cream, president of our board at the Institute, and she represents the 5th generation to work at the company that started in the late 1800s. The company employs 1,070 cows that produce, with a bit of help from the humans, 2.3 gallons of ice cream per year. My math tells me that's 2,149 gallons of ice cream per cow. Not sure how that happens, but it's impressive. Lindsay, you shared with me in a prior discussion that you haven't done a great job with succession planning. And so what has the challenge been, and what do you recommend others do differently?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. For Giffords, and maybe other family businesses, our challenge, even looking back to me and my family members being placed or jumping into our positions that we're in today, there hasn't been a real set plan for even me. It wasn't my uncle and father, saying I was going to be the CEO from when I was little. But I think one of the challenges that now in my role I see is that in a family business, you get stuck in the day-to-day because we have that do whatever it takes mentality. If something's wrong, we're going to jump into it, whether we really should or not, because that's just, at the end of the day, we want to service our customers and get the best quality product out the door. So I think we and I at Giffords have got caught up in the day-to-day so much that we haven't taken that time to look into the future of key positions that are going to be retiring. And now we're kind of have our backs to the wall because we have 2 key positions that are a gentleman retiring at the end of this year and another gentleman retiring after 44 years next summer. And these are key roles that have been with our family for a very long time. And I think one of the challenges is that every time we've talked about it, we have a plan and then something happens. And so that plan kind of veers off track. And also, when we've thought about it, trying to put someone, as a predecessor behind that individual, you think about resources and who's going, paying for 2 people to do one job, for example. But looking back and going forward for Giffords, and what I recommend for other family businesses is, it is so important. It is one of the most crucial functions, I feel, of a business, is succession planning and having a plan with a timeline and shadowing, so that that next generation for that position, they have all the skills and tools and the experience to be successful in their role. So they're not being set up for failure per se.
Well, you bring up a great point, Lindsay, and that succession planning is not just about the family and ownership, but it's about, I guess you could say, every position at the company. Mm-hmm. So moving over to Tony. Tony Sherman is president and CEO of Jasper Wyman & Sons, a company founded in 1874 and is currently owned by the fourth generation. While they started selling sardines, in 1900, they smartly changed over to blueberries and now sell more than 56 billion blueberries, individual wild blueberries per year, making them the #1 selling brand of frozen fruit in America. So Tony, please share the process you went through when you joined the business, in particular the agreement you reached with the board regarding your operating responsibilities.
Sure. So good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for having me. Thanks to our sponsors and my co-panelists. Excited to be part of this panel here today. So the process was a lengthy one, and I think left no stone unturned. If you think about it, the stakes were very high for both the family that brought me in and for myself. For the family, obviously, they were seeking the next leader of the company that hopefully would, be around for a quarter century, as was true for my predecessor. Handing the reins over to somebody who didn't come up through the ranks, and therefore they did not have, the opportunity to see me in action day in, day out. I'm sure was challenging and obviously a huge decision for them. For me, it involved a move and uprooting my family with, kids in middle school, which isn't the easiest time to move kids. And also it involved joining a family-owned business for the first time in my career. And I'd say I had heard wonderful stories from others, and I had heard some not so wonderful stories from others. And so the stakes were high, and the process, I think, worked extremely well. There were many rounds of interviews. We really got to know each other well. By the end of those interviews, I think I had laid out, my vision and plans for the business. So I think there was strong alignment as to the direction that we would take the business together. And I think also, and really importantly, we worked through values as part of those discussions, and really got to ensure that our core values were consistent. And I think that has proved extremely important and a great way to set the foundation that has proved has led to a wonderful working relationship. As to the question you asked about sort of establishing guardrails or guidelines for how we would interact. So once I had the offer, one of the things that was really important to me in making sure that it was going to be an opportunity that I was fulfilled by was get a real understanding of the family's expectations for their involvement or not in the business. And to be totally frank, I wasn't looking for an opportunity where I was sitting next to the family day in, day out, and involving everybody in every decision. And as Greg, I think, had pointed out, I too like to make decisions. And so I wanted real clarity on who was making what decisions and how we were engaging and how frequently we were communicating, and really who, what the roles were of the family, the board, myself and the executive team and all of that. And so we actually laid out on paper a document that got pretty specific in terms of, scale and scope of decisions and who would be involved where, and communication and frequency of communication and so on. And We identified board liaisons, which were, folks who I can engage with directly on a more frequent basis and then liaise with the rest of the board. And I would highly, highly recommend for any in the audience here today, if you're an owner of a family-owned business and you're planning to bring in somebody from the outside, I really think it was an important part of setting the expectations on both sides in a way that has laid that groundwork so that everybody was clear going in, and both sides have lived up to those expectations in a terrific way. I feel so fortunate to work for the family that I do. And I hope they feel the same way about me, but I'm 3.5 years in, and man, it's exceeded my expectations. And I think a lot of that was a result of the painstaking process that we took on both sides through that interview, probably 7 to 8 months process that we went through.
So Joanne, there's some interesting parallels between what Tony went through and what you went through. Could you explain your CEO hiring process? And in particular, one detail we'd love to hear about is the evaluation process you went through and what you learned about yourself.
Yeah. It's very similar to what Tony went through, with the exception that I had been involved in the business for decades, and at the time was chief operating officer of the business. When Gene and Peter approached me in applying for the position for CEO, that's exactly what they meant, applying for the position of CEO. And I went through a process of testing and evaluation with they and our board of directors using an outside consultant who would evaluate, this person evaluated and tested me as one would evaluate and test Tony, as if they did not know who I was. And the testing involved everything from just how I go about making decisions, the basics of knowledge and communication in those areas. Also quite in-depth 360 with my colleagues in that process. One of the things that Gene, Peter, and our board asked of me was to present to the board that if I was selected as CEO, what would be my plan for the company in the next 3 years? What goals would we reach? How would I change? Who would be the executive team? And actually to submit an organization chart along with that presentation. And I wanted to, if I was selected, and obviously was, I would want to have continue the culture of transparency that we have for the company. So I actually spoke to the individuals who I wanted to be on the executive team and shared my thoughts with them, shared with them the 360 that I received from the consultant, including those areas that I needed to improve, got them to react to the 360 and they gave me feedback. When I wrote my organization chart, they actually helped build the organization chart. Now, these are some of my colleagues, including individuals who were also applying for the position. And in that process, not only did I have their open feedback in responding to my 360, it created a wonderful dialogue about how they would perform if I was selected. And at the time I made the presentation to the board of directors, these colleagues who are now members of the executive team had a copy of the presentation in advance, had the goals in advance, and were part of the plan when this was submitted. And it worked out really, really, really well. That process of including them and being totally transparent has helped build this level of trust that we have this saying, I've got your back, and I never feel alone. We really, truly feel that they have my back and I have their back. And it was a terrific process. And we hit all those goals that first year, and for the most part, continuing to hit those goals, with the exception of COVID, but overall, we're still continuing to hit those goals. And I think that's what helped us so much this year with COVID is that whole process of learning both about ourselves and myself and what I need to do to be a more effective leader.
Well, it's a great example of just the wonderful trust that exists at Geiger Corp, and the willingness on the part of Gene and Peter and the executive board to be open to your ideas and trust that you've got the company's interests, foremost in your mind. Tony, back to you. I'd like to shift gears a little bit to the phasing in of transitions. And you came into a situation where the company was 146 years old. Your predecessor was there for 25 years. The leadership team and ownership group had been there for decades, and you didn't know anything about agriculture. Simply put, you were a rookie and from the outside. So that's a tough situation. What advice would you give to others coming into a similar situation?
Yeah, it was a challenging situation. I think my answer, though, is relatively simple, and that is that my recommendation is to bring a balance of humility and confidence and conviction. And within that, there's a lot to unpack. But I think walking in the door in that kind of an environment, truly listening, being inquisitive, seeking insights from those who have been there before you, and you don't have to have all the answers. You need to rely on a fantastic team, and I'm fortunate to have one. And so I think that's part of the humility, knowing that that you don't need to have all the answers, that you really truly want to seek information from those who have been around, listen, learn. And then through that process, also the other side of it is having the confidence and conviction to take that information, set objectives, chart the course, and inspire the organization to the path that you've laid out. And so, it was challenging, I'd say, and still is. I still have lots to learn. You mentioned agriculture. I don't have an agriculture background. It is a fascinating and obviously core part of our business. And again, I'm thrilled to have an amazing team that I can rely on and learn from. Lindsay, your comment about succession planning is poignant and something that's very much of focus for us and really, really important. But yeah, that's how I would recommend that folks go into a situation like what I did, is bringing humility, true humility, and then having strong confidence to lay out, okay, so based on all of this, here's the path that we're going to go. Feedback on the path that you've laid out before you deliver it to the full organization. Make sure that you've got the right plans, and then be prepared to adapt and evolve from there. And in our case, it's been a pretty exciting ride for these 3.5 years, and I think the future's quite bright, and that's a great result of involving all of those parties who have been part of the organization for so many years, getting their true perspectives and laying out a plan and charting the course and inspiring everybody to chase after it.
So Joanne, your transition was a little different because you had been there for a long time, but still, you're taking over from Gene, who was is such a big person in my mind, anyway, in my eyes. So how did you and Gene approach the transition, and how did it go?
When the decision was made that I would be president and eventually CEO, Gene announced that that would happen 4 months prior to my actually assuming the role as president. And at that time, we started our transition. So in essence, I started becoming president before I was officially president within the organization. And I have to give Gene so much credit. He was terrific and continues to be terrific in terms of having us flip our roles. It had to be so difficult for him because he had been president for 40 years, since he was 28 years old. And I'm not going to tell you how old he is now, but you can do the math. And he we would meet at the very beginning on a daily basis and every morning, and we would either speak about what was happening in the process. It essentially started our business planning process for the following year, even though Gene was still officially president of the organization. And we were able to incorporate so many of the plans that we had developed as a group or a team with Gene. And Gene would stay back and step back. And he was very careful of when individuals may ask me a question and Gene was in the background, for him never to react, because he was aware that even subconsciously he could send his body signals in terms of whether he was tacitly approving of whatever decisions I was making. Lindsay, I can relate to you in that area, or not. And as it went so well that originally we were supposed to wait almost a year before I would assume CEO, and after 4 months being president, then he announced I was CEO as well. And now we don't communicate as frequently. We still, speak 2-3 times a week. Often it's more socially. And if there's anything critical that I think he needs to be aware of in the interim, I certainly let him and Pete know. We've instituted a process of family meetings in between our board meetings. That includes not only Gene and Peter, but also David. And even though David is so immersed in operations, he has to put his family owner hat on at the same time. And those interim meetings have been so helpful in terms of clearly defining both their role, my role, and even David's role as both a family member and future owner, as well as immersed in the operations of the business. It's been going great.
Yeah, that's super. Congratulations. I'd like to bring in Paul. Paul Wayman is president and CFO of Hancock Lumber, started in 1848 and is currently owned by the 5th, 6th, and 7th generations of the Hancock family. Hancock has been named to the best places to work in Maine 7 years running, and its sawmills produce 90 million board feet of eastern white pine boards per year. That is enough wood to stretch around the world 1.5 times at Portland's latitude of 43 degrees. But I'm sorry to say, I've got bad news for you, Paul. Tony's 56 billion blueberries, they go around the world at that latitude 14 times. The blueberries are beating the lumber. So Paul, what was your approach to the role of CFO? And how do you and Kevin, the current CEO and former president, work together today?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Stephen. Those blueberries grow much quicker, obviously, than pine trees as well. So I started at Hancock Lumber in February of 2016 and moved into my role as president and CFO in January of this year. Accounting and finance is my background, but I've got a keen interest in leadership and strategy. When I approached the CFO role when I joined back in 2016, we have a great finance team. We have a great accounting team who take care of a lot of the day-to-day and detail work. And so my approach was more on the sort of long-term strategic planning perspective. We had some significant investments that we were making both in capital and in stock redemptions that we needed to have a long-term view of, obviously. Secondly, Hancock Lumber is very metrics driven. We have 2 divisions, a sawmill division and a retail lumberyard division, building products division. And a lot of metrics, a lot of detail, and I'm a very simple guy, so I like to simplify things. So taking a lot of that detail and from my perspective, simplifying it as much as I could so that when I'm presenting or showing things to employees, customers, board of directors, leadership team, I want to boil it down and get it as simple as possible because otherwise I get lost in the detail myself. So simplifying and being very focused. So that was a second thing. And then I'm a big lover of cash. Cash is king in any business, and particularly in a family business. So having a really focused sight on cash flows and understanding how those cash flows work for this business was important. For me personally, developing relationships and similar to what Tony said, collaboration with the leadership team here. And then really learning out, this was a new business for me. I was from the printing and greeting card and finance industries. And so learning a new business, learning from everybody involved in the business, from employees to customers to vendors, professional partners, etc., was key. Then as far as working with Kevin, we've heard his name a few times already on this call. Kevin is an incredible individual, brilliant visionary and strategist. And he's built over the years a very great culture in this business and a great leadership team. So, he allowed me in my CFO role originally to really make that role my own and really do what I wanted with that role. And so that was important to me joining the company. And it really worked very well for both of us and for the rest of the company, I think. Today, Kevin is obviously still deeply involved in the business and very focused on that vision strategy piece when liaising with the board and ownership. And then my responsibility really is around day-to-day operations and really strategic implementation of the plans that we put in place as a leadership team, working closely with the rest of our leadership team and employees. So that's how we work together today.
Super. So one of the most, Lindsay, you're next. One of the best stories, the most intimate stories that I heard in all the discussions leading up to this was the story of getting your desk literally attached to your uncle's. And just share that story and what that taught you.
Yeah, literally, this is what they did. At the time, I had just recently graduated from college, and they hired me as the assistant to the controller. I had just recently got my first own small office of my own space, and that lasted all of a couple of weeks, I think. My dad and uncle met with me, and they said that they were going to have our maintenance family members move my desk into my Uncle Roger's office. And I thought they both had lost their minds at the time. I didn't understand. It seemed so bizarre to me. And they literally had my desk right next up against my uncle's desk. They wanted me to hear every conversation that my uncle had, whether it was on the phone. My uncle handled the production finance end of the business. My father handled the sales and marketing as they were growing it. They wanted me to hear all those tough conversations, great conversations that he was having with, vendors or customers or a lot of times family members, meaning our employees and family members. And I remember a couple of times, one of our employee family members would come in and want to chat with my Uncle Roger, and you'd say, all right, yeah, sit down, shut the door. And I remember, eyes popping out of their heads, staring at me, saying, well, this is kind of a private conversation. This is confidential. Maybe Lindsay should leave the room. And my uncle said, no, whatever you can say in front of me, you can say in front of Lindsay. And let me tell you, some of these conversations in my young 20s, they were tough conversations to hear. But it surely taught me a lot. My uncle, after board meetings that they would have me sit in on or conversations, we would have a sidebar conversations afterwards so that I could openly ask questions and maybe learn a little more background behind what was said to truly understand. And overall, when I think back, I'm like, oh my gosh, they hadn't lost their minds. They were genius. They just immersed me in the business and threw me right in. And it really taught me a lot. And it really taught me a lot that, family businesses are unique, and there is no cookie cutter approach. There is no book here, read this, and this is how you're going to run a family business. And you have to make changes and you have to shift along the way. And for a family business, every single decision that is made impacts the family, the brand, and our overall family of employees and their families. So really every decision is critical to our overall family. And it just, I mean, I look back and I say to myself, if my daughter ever wants to get involved in the business, or my son, that is definitely an approach that I would recommend. It really taught me a lot.
Would you attach their desk to yours?
Oh boy, for their sanity, I don't know. No. I mean, my daughter's 7 and she's, telling everybody that she wants to be the CEO of Giffords when she gets older. So, hey, maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
So your dad and uncle were running the business when you became CEO. Did you feel they were looking over your shoulder as you took on that role?
Oh God, no, the opposite. My father and uncle, my family members and I are so fortunate. They've never micromanaged at all. They, gave me enough rope to swim, but not to sink. And they really, thinking back now, they had more trust in me than I even had in myself. I didn't have the confidence. I was lacking in confidence. That's still, growing every day. The more I'm involved in the business and growing and continuing to learn. But they really, half the time I was trying to pull them back into the business to help with the decisions. And, they really let my generation and run with it and just use them as a sounding board.
Yeah, that's great. So again, we're talking about transitioning leadership at the moment. And Greg, you shared with me that one of your struggles or failures, if you will, it was taking too long to turn over some of your responsibilities to your team. In this case, referring back to my opening comments, you were too important. So why did it take so long to transition those responsibilities, and what benefits have you seen now that you have given those over?
Yeah, I think in a family business, you feel that your name is out there, and you want to protect everything about the brand. And, having a career, executive director of Ski Main Association and running the farm, it became very clear that if I was going to maintain both operations, I needed to have somebody that was in charge. And our retail is such a critical face of the business, is that we took the step to hire a manager. And that step was a little bit scary, expensive, but necessary in order to start to have some help. The family, mom and dad were still around and still involved in doing things, but in order to go to a new level of customer service and retail, I needed to bring somebody in. And it, just happened at the right time that there was a young couple that were very interested. We were fortunate we had enough space in this big farmhouses that we built an apartment, so that I told Romy, if you will commit to a 2-year management position, we'll build an apartment so you have a place to live right on the farm. And she did commit to that, and then had babies and bought a house and moved on. But that really gave us the ability to see how much more we could accomplish when I had more, management help on duty. Because, we'd have our morning meeting and then I'd go off to my other career, and I had the confidence that things weren't only just being taken care of on the farm, they were improving over what I had done, because I gave her the ability to make those retail and design. I'm not a designer. She knew how to set up retail to increase, sales. The next step was to find someone to be more in charge of the harvest. So now we're a little tiny business, we're a hobby. And I have an orchard manager, and I have a market manager, and I have a payroll that is pretty damn substantial right here in the Cumberland Center, Maine. But luckily, we've been able to grow the business. But that always brings up the point, so we grow the business so we can hire more people, so we have to raise more money so that we can grow a little bit. It's this cycle that everyone goes through is, what's the bottom line at the end of the year? The bottom line is improving a little bit every year, but we are so much more at risk because we've grown the business so much. It's not just we open if we have apples and we don't if we don't. There's a lot. And with COVID hitting, March was, we considered, during blossom, we could kill all the blossoms on the trees and just end the crop for the year and take the year off. I mean, and we seriously considered that. But luckily, by the time full bloom came around in May, we had some confidence that that businesses would be back in operation. We delayed our opening this year to September 1st, which is 4 to 6 weeks later than normal, not knowing what the landscape would be. But we hit the ground running. And again, I had a management team that was there ready to make some of those adaptations. And thank goodness I have a good management team, because we are working a million hours a day just to maintain our inventories, because people are just so supportive of local agriculture right now. I mean, it's been quite remarkable and heartwarming to see that people are supporting our business.
That's super. So changing topics now, we're going to talk about employees, which are obviously critical to all of us. And Paul, every employee at Hancock has a voice, and they are expected to make mistakes. Why, and what impact does that have?
Right, that's a good question. So if you think about the vision or mission of Hancock Lumber, you might say, well, it's producing sawmill logs, or it's producing lumber, 90 million board feet, as you said, or it's building homes for people, helping people build homes. Well, no, our mission is to enhance the lives of the people that work here. And that's the mission of the company. And Kevin often asks the question, what would change if everyone felt trusted, respected, valued, and heard? And his answer to that is everything would change. And so we really do value our people, our team members. And, to do that, we literally give everybody a voice. Everybody has an ability to make decisions. We allow them and expect them to lead throughout. And that's been really heightened during the last 6 months with COVID. We've really made decisions very locally and very quickly and reacted to the situation in that respect, and really allowed people to do that. We've over 550 team members now, and all great people, and all with wonderful skills and knowledge of our business. I came into this business new and fresh, and really didn't know one end of a tree from the other. So, you've got to rely on everybody, the experts in the business, the people who have been here, in some cases, multi-generations. They've been here many years. And so you rely on those employees and team members every day. And so we give them the ability to lead from the front, make decisions from the front. And as a result of that, we make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I've probably made several mistakes on this call. So, we make mistakes all the time. And if we give everybody that decision-making ability, we're going to see mistakes around. But if we don't do that, then we don't grow as individuals, and we don't grow as a company. So, the impact of putting employees first, why do we do it, and what's the impact? Well, the impact is we've created, and Kevin and the leadership team before me have created a wonderful culture. As you said, Steve, we've had the honor of being voted a best place to work in Maine now for 7 years running. We have a high level of employee engagement. And the outcome of that, we really just view this as an outcome, is excellent financial and business results. Culture here really drives our great outcomes. And that's why we do it. And that's what we get from giving everybody a voice and allowing them to lead.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So Greg, training and empowering employees is important to you, including training or especially training the youngest ones. It's a core part of your culture and something you think about every day. You can't, but we talked earlier about, making yourself less important. So you can't be the one to do all that training. How do you train the trainers?
Well, yeah. Mostly it's through experience and bringing people in that, we have a common love of really the property and the family and the brand. And working with both my managers, Sue in the market and Doug in the orchard, we just talked about what's important the business. You know, safety is certainly number one. You know, we try to have a safety meeting every day to talk about everything. And obviously with COVID, that's a new twist. But we're just trying to train the trainers. We have a lot of first-time employees. I mean, we have the high school kids. We have, you know, up to 10 high school kids that work with us. And we'd like to have the 15-year-olds, a freshman coming in, so that we can train them and have them for 4 years to be with us. And it's taken on the retail side a little bit of effort to train the trainer on, these are new people. They have not had a job before. The ability to come to work and know what to do, that takes a lot of time. And I can sometimes see frustration on her part that, you know, some of the kids haven't picked it up quickly. And it's like, you know, that's just part of the process. Everybody has a different learning style and a learning speed. And it's been interesting for me to try to find what's the most effective tools that I can share with Sue so that she can work with the staff. And I like Sue being in the market because, you know, people learn by example. You know, all of us in leadership, I'm sure, are very hard workers. And it's that example that everybody else picks up on, is that they know that we're moving all the time. And then in the orchard, you know, there's some real basic things. I figure we have 1 million touches of the human hand to apples from the time they come from the tree to the picking bag, to the box, to the sorting, to the display, so we're not in the billions of the blueberries or the million board feet, but, you know, mostly it's just sharing with Doug the importance of the quality of handling the fruit. And that's the key thing that he shares with all of his staff. We're very fortunate. I mean, we're seasonal, but we have key staff that comes back year after year after year. You know, we have a couple of guys and a couple of moms out there in the orchard, and it's really super effective because they all are part of the team. But the very critical thing is that, especially with the new employees, that when you come to work, no matter what's happening in your day, you are now part of the Sweets of Family, and the customer driving in, you know, they expect to have a certain level of service when they get here. And even if you've had a bad day, if you're having a really bad day and you can't come to work, I want you to tell me, because I don't want you to be bringing that baggage to the workplace. But when you walk on the site, you're part of the family, you're representing our name. My mom is 90 years old. She's still sitting on the porch overseeing the entire operation on a daily basis. And, you know, we want Connie to be very proud of the people that are out there representing her name and all the generations that come before us. So.
Joanne, a second ago, Paul talked about employees making mistakes, and you've talked about the need to sub-optimize. Just share you also shared with me before the 3 principles in raising your sons and how that impacts your work. So just talk about that for a minute.
Thank you. Yes, there are 3 principles, and if any of my colleagues are listening, I'm sure that this will sound familiar to them because it's been part of my leadership video series with them. But the first is whenever you run into a situation, any kind of situation, whether it's a vendor, a client, a colleague, being a mom of 4 sons and a daughter, always assume honorable intent until proven otherwise. And raising 4 sons, and they come back, you find out about a situation, it's really easy to jump to the negative, especially with my youngest, very easy to jump to the negative. And the same thing in business is that no matter what situation comes up, rather than jump to the negative, oh, that must have happened because he or she was trying to undermine some issue. It's, oh, what was their intent? And most always, it's always an honorable intent. When a mistake is made, it's with the best of intentions. The second is do the right thing. And that's a lot harder than it sounds, because doing the right thing often can either be to our own personal detriment, or it could hurt an individual or a situation. And COVID this year, in doing the right thing, has been a very difficult thing for many of us when we've had to make those decisions. And for my sons and daughter, doing the right thing has been difficult for them because they've had to make choices that are different than the influences of others when they make those right choices. And the last is it's okay to make mistakes. And Paul, he said it so well. And in fact, I'm glad that this is recorded because I want to listen again to what you were saying about a culture of being okay to make mistakes. Certainly, I've made the biggest mistakes in the company over my career, for sure. And it's okay because it's in that process of when you make mistakes, you truly learn. So that gets into this whole issue of optimizing and sub-optimizing. As a leader for most of my career, I've always been taught to optimize. Do your best. Optimize your time. Make the best decisions. Always look for the best results. And what I've learned working through my coach is as a true CEO and leader, it's best to sub-optimize in many or most situations. And that means when someone comes to you and asks you a question and you know the answer, you don't have to give the answer. In fact, it's better to sub-optimize and not give the answer and let them either come up with the answer on their own with some help. And even when I know that the answer, that I would have made a different choice and a different answer, by sub-optimizing is a step back and see what happens. And that's hard. For me, that has probably been the most difficult thing as a CEO is to sub-optimize. And at the same time, it's awesome because people make decisions differently and the outcomes are often better than if I had made the decision myself. Now, this year, there have been times I've had to really lean in and take the lead and make some decisions that were very, very difficult. And that's part of doing the right thing. But now we're well on our way. And by my sub-optimizing, even in our planning processes and in some of our goals, we are going to exceed what we thought was going to happen to our business as a result of COVID this year. We're going to exceed our sales goals. We're going to exceed our targets. And we're well on our way for next year. So I got to keep working on that. That's one of those things I have to learn is to let it go and let others make those decisions. And that does lead to some mistakes, but mostly it leads to more successes.
You're right. It is hard. I struggle with that quite a bit. So, Greg, it's very much along the same lines. One of your sayings of the company is improvement, not perfection. What does that mean to the farm?
Well, yeah, I think all of us and many in the audience, I mean, we want things to be great. We want them really to be perfect. And sometimes we think high expectations is a great lofty goal because we want people to strive for the best. But we really have to sometimes take a step back and say, did we improve on what we were doing? And I've heard a lot of people say, take that deep breath, take a step back. And I think that phrase has been a real huge aid to me, because as long as we're seeing improvement, then I know that everybody is focused. They're thinking about their job and their role, and we're making progress. Perfection can be disappointing because it's hard to reach it.
Yeah. And it's in the eyes of the beholder too.
Correct.
So when I had wonderful conversations with each of these five, I asked many of the same questions. And the next question, I got pretty much the same answer from everyone. So I'm only going to ask it once. And this goes to you, Paul. Why is it important for Hancock Lumber to remain family owned?
So family ownership, as everybody on this Zoom call knows, is great. I mean, it works really well. It's not always appropriate for every family to go several generations, but it is in many cases, and many of the companies on here certainly are great examples of that. For Hancock Lumber, it's, as you said, Steve, 7th generation now since 1848. Still headquartered, home office here in Casco, Maine, and I'm looking across the street at a sawmill, and next door is a lumber yard, and so it's still very concentrated here. Family ownership with Hancock, similar to Greg's company, is very concentrated, even though it is 7th generation, and sometimes when you get to that generation, it's split many ways, as you know. But the reason for that is really one of the key principles and strategies that Kevin and his family and his family before him and Carol Hancock, Kevin's mom, who's a significant stockholder, they want to stay locally and independently owned. And that's just been so key to them and the key to the success of the business, that they're not driven by wide variety of stockholders, shareholders across the country, or driven by a private equity group, or a parent company that really doesn't know the local market here in Maine. They're able to make decisions locally, decisions quickly, and it's led to great business results. And I think one of the key things that they've been able to do through this family ownership and maintaining family ownership is provide a culture, as we talked about earlier, of employee first culture. And not every company is able to do that when the ownership is wide and dispersed. So that's been one of the keys and is key for the long-term success of this business. We're driven by a very dedicated local Maine family, similar to everybody on this call, and that's produced great results.
So the next two questions I also asked everybody, and again, many of the same answers. Tony, this is for you. And the topic here is getting better, improving. Tony, how do you get better?
How do I get better? Well, I'm about to turn 50, and I think I've decided I'm as good as I'm going to get. So I'm done now. Hard to land a joke on a Zoom call, but I'm glad you laughed, Lindsay. Thank you. So how do I get better? I am completely focused on being very intentional on getting better. And I do that in a handful of different ways. First off, I think it's critical to surround oneself with people who are smart, capable, and not afraid to provide feedback. And I spend a lot of time very actively seeking feedback from my team and trying to make sure that they feel truly comfortable giving me that feedback. I also find, the time that I spend reading, my wife always reads, novels and so on. I'm reading business stuff. That's basically what I read, the news and business related material. I find it inspiring. I find that it helps me in a whole host of ways in terms of constantly seeking ways to improve. I also network with a number of other CEOs and business leaders, and I'm part of a few different groups, mostly informal, but I find those to be really great engagements and again, very effective at helping me to get better. I listen to the How I Built This podcast, which if you haven't checked out, I highly recommend you do. Anytime you have a long drive or wherever you like to listen to podcasts, that one is a great one. And then I think the last thing I'd say is that I try to be very intentional in the moment. And I remember exactly where this came up, probably 15 years ago in my career with a colleague. We were leaving a meeting and he said, okay, well, what could we have done better? What could we have done differently that would have yielded an even better result? And that stuck with me. Maybe it seems basic to others, but I try to be very intentional in the moment and sort of not wait until some big milestone event and say, okay, well, what can I do better? Or what have I learned? But rather on a frequent basis, when an engagement happens, when a meeting happens, when a decision happens, okay, well, how could I have done that better? And I think if you're really intentional and you make the time, you have a much higher likelihood of truly getting better. And I guess the last thing I'll say on the topic is I find that it is that those moments for me happen most when I'm out in nature exercising. And the move to Maine has been so spectacular for a whole host of reasons, and that's one of them. When I'm trail running in the woods or out on a kayak or whatever the case may be, that's when either I think my best ideas come or when my best reflections come on ways that I can improve or think that I can do better.
I often will combine two of those, the trail running and the Guy Raz, and I'm just on overload at the end of that long run. Lindsay, how do you help others get better?
Yeah, so similar to what Joanne was alluding to a few minutes ago, and from my earlier response in regards to my uncle and father's approach, I'm not perfect and I'm still working on this, but I'm trying my best to take my father and uncle's approach and not give the answers when folks come to me with a problem. I try not to be the coat rack, if you will, and let them just dump their problem onto me. I listen, and then I ask them, you know, what do you suggest? What do you recommend? How do you think we should handle this? And almost all the time, they already have the answer, but they just lack the confidence and the trust in themselves. So, you know, and more oftentimes, their response on how to handle the situation is a better response in how to handle it than I would have even given them for advice. Because, you know, again, it's just the lack of confidence. I mean, I went through that. I still have my moments where I lack that confidence, but I think, you know, as we continue to grow and our roles in our company, hopefully will continue to grow. And I mean, as far as like helping others be better and grow in their roles or you know, being promoted to other positions, you know, any continued education, we're big on sending them to courses or seminars or conferences or flying them to conventions or whatever it may be, things that they may be passionate about. It might not have anything to do with their role. It could be something to do with another role that they just want to kind of connect the dots with. And that's fine too, because the more that we empower them, the better off Giffords will be in the end, is how I see it. So, yeah.
That's great. So I'm going to make a comment to the audience, and that is, I've got one more question for Paul and one for Tony, both around the idea of stakeholders. And so if the audience wants to start putting some questions into the chat box, that would be great. So Paul, like many of the panelists, again, there's a lot of overlap here. You pay attention to multiple stakeholders in everything you do. And you've got 3 simple rules. What are those rules, and what impact do they have?
So stakeholders, when I think of stakeholders, I think of employees, I think of customers, board of directors, vendors, professional partners, and local community, and all of those are important. And Hancock Lumber's developed great relationships with them over many, many years, and multi-generational. So deep-rooted relationships. Like I loved Joanne's answer earlier. The 3 simple rules I have are the 3 simple rules I have for my children. I have 2 children, a son and a daughter. And when they were young, my wife and I, we had 3 rules that we expected of them. You know, always be polite, always show respect, and always tell the truth. Polite, respect, and truth. And I hold myself accountable to those same 3 rules in every relationship that I have, business, personal, whatever it may be. And I find that if you treat people the way you want to be treated yourself, in that way, following those 3 rules, the relationship is very strong and it works for both sides. And it just creates long-term value for both sets of stakeholders, you know, for both sides. So always be polite, always show respect, and always tell the truth.
That's great. So Tony, you were in a bit of a tough spot back a few months ago when it came time to harvest, and you've got a lot of seasonal employees. So who are your stakeholders, and how did your stakeholder philosophy impact your decisions around that harvest season?
Yeah. So our stakeholders, Paul's talked a lot about, and others as well, about employees. Certainly, first and foremost, our employees are a critical stakeholder. I'd say also our local community. we take our role in the communities in which we operate, which are rural communities in Down East Maine and in Prince Edward Island, Canada. We take that role very, very seriously, keeping those communities vibrant and strong. Our suppliers, and in many cases, those are small and medium-sized family farms, growers of wild blueberries from whom we buy blueberries, and our industry has gone through ups and downs and challenges, and certainly we take our role, our responsibility in recognizing that their success is critical to our own success. We take that very seriously. Our customers, our consumers, for sure, putting healthy and safe food into the supply chain, and then certainly our owners and stockholders. So those are the key stakeholders as we go about managing our business. And as is the case, I think Joanne was mentioning this, there are often complexities in managing the priorities of those different stakeholders. And our harvest, I think, was a good example of more, I guess, or enhanced complexities than we had perhaps dealt with ever before, doing a harvest under a pandemic environment where you're bringing in more than a couple hundred seasonal employees in for a short period of time to bring in the crop into a community where there had been virtually no spread of COVID at the time, and those folks needing to live and work in a typical harvest, and they come and live and work in close quarters. And so I guess the other thing to note is that we get one harvest a year. Wild blueberries only grow in abundance in one region of the world, and there's no opportunity to go to South America and get them if something goes wrong during ours. If we can't bring in the harvest, we have nothing to sell for the next 12 months. And so very, very challenging situation. And what we did was to prioritize, first and foremost, safety, health, and of both our permanent employees as well as our seasonal employees who we bring in for that harvest period, as well as the community. And we built a plan that is literally 14 pages long with extraordinary detail that we don't have enough time to get into here today, but covered every aspect, everything that we could. That we were fortunate in that, we had 4 or 5 months or so to build that plan. And I'm thankful that we had that amount of time, because there were so many layers, so many complexities, and ultimately, it was, I will say, not without challenge, not without sleepless nights, but we pulled it off. And first and foremost, again, we kept the community safe, the employees safe, and we were able to, in fact, bring in the full harvest and remain fully operational. And I am so hopeful that by next August, there will be a broadly implemented vaccine, but because living through it again will be a challenge, but we've done it once and we'll do it again. And I know, on a broader context, we're actually very fortunate in the way things have played out under this really challenging pandemic environment for the world. So, that's an example of how we manage through those competing, sometimes competing priorities that are really challenging. But we absolutely take a stakeholder philosophy, and first and foremost, it's about employees. And I too want to go back and listen to Paul's comments once more.
So you are, Tony, you're leading right into the audience Q&A beautifully, and Bill Caniff has a question that I'm going to direct to Lindsay. What's the most difficult problem you have ever faced?
Oh God, which day? Most difficult, I'll tell you, COVID, let's just sticking with the COVID pandemic. This year, we right as COVID was hitting and things were being shut down, that same week, our 5 family-owned ice cream stand, that division of our business, was supposed to be opening that Friday for opening day, free cone giveaway. I mean, usually there's cops, usually there's a snowstorm. People lined up, across, hundreds of people come to our stands. And even though we are considered an essential business, we could have opened. And the more we learned that week, at the end of the day, with my leadership team, we had to make the decision that we're not prepared to open. We don't know enough about this pandemic and how it's going to impact our family members that work at our stands. So we made the decision to not open them, which is the first time in history that we've never opened them the 3rd Friday of March. So that was a huge deal. And we waited until we were fully prepared and until we had more information. And we held off from opening. We opened 2 months later, which financially, that hurt. But at the end of the day, our family members were safe. Our loyal customers were safe. So we made the right decision. Great.
I'm not sure who wants to answer this one, so I'll open it up to the group. The question is from Gary Bergeron, good friend, and his question is, how do we as a group duplicate the success the panelists have enjoyed more broadly across the state of Maine? Is there anyone that would like to tackle that one? How do we as an audience or as a group duplicate your success, your tremendous success? And if no one steps up, I'm going to pick on someone.
I mean, I'll just quickly say, I don't want people to get sick of me. I think one way is through networking. I mean, like Tony was saying earlier, I sit on different boards or different groups through IFOB and other organizations, and it's groups like this, and I'm learning a ton. I feel like I could learn a ton from the other panelists still, even after this. And I think that's the unique aspect of Maine and businesses in Maine, is we want to help one another get better and grow. So I think it's more of that, the networking and groups that are out there.
And a little quick plug for IFOB. It's a wonderful forum to have that networking. Joanne, you seem to be leaning in. Did you have a response there?
There's if I can think of how I was assisted when I first became CEO, is I ended up having a CEO mentor, and was another CEO in the state of Maine, and he really was so helpful to me in helping our business grow and be successful. And I'm part of a networking group with Tony, and I spent some time with Tony that was also very helpful to me. So it's not only the group networking that is so critical, but there might be some one-on-one networking, because I was a beneficiary of that with someone else in the state of Maine who's a leader, and he has opened doors and opened my eyes and helped me make contacts. And I think that in turn, other great businesses would, I'm sure, be very open to assisting other businesses in the same way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Paul, this next question's for you. And it talks about Hancock's tremendous success in being named 7 years in a row to the best places to work in Maine. Obviously, you guys are doing a lot right. What kinds of specific policies, practices, and changes are put into place to make that a reality and not just talk?
Okay, that's probably quite a long answer, I guess. And, I can't take any credit for any of this, because Kevin and the leadership team put all of this in place way before my time. And, it really goes back to putting the employee first. And I don't want to be just talk here. I want to try and get a little bit specific, but creating a work-life balance that really works well. We talk a lot about people working here less and getting paid more. And some of the practices we've put in place to do that is something we call performance gold. So an incentive program that every employee in the company participates in, and it creates a compensation structure that really encourages people to work 40 hours or 44 hours, not 60 or 70 hours, and rely on overtime. So we want to get our base pay right, and we make sure we have the incentive programs in place that people are, employees are not relying on overtime to make a good compensation package. And then, really listening to our employees, as we talked about, everybody has a voice. So making sure you have the practices in place that you can allow people to have that voice, and you listen to them. So for example, we have daily huddles. We call them huddles, but small meetings, small groups at all levels of the company and across all departments, where a supervisor or a manager will talk to the group of employees, talk about the issues for the day, talk about safety, and really listening to people's voice in those huddles. And again, another specific example, when we do any capital project, it's not just the general manager of the site that puts it together and then sends it in and gets approval. He gets input from everybody who's going to be impacted by that. And that's a key when you think about this, the employee. If you're not involving them in something that's going to impact them, that just doesn't work. You have to be involving them in every stage of the play. So we're not perfect by any means, and we certainly can improve all the time. But those are some quick examples I would give.
Okay, super. I'll also note, just because I'm somewhat familiar with it, that Hancock actually uses the survey for best places to work in Maine as a scorecard or report card. And they pay a great deal of attention to that and use that as a place, as a source of ideas to improve. We don't have any other questions, so I'm wondering if any of the panelists have a question for another panelist. That's not something anyone was expecting, but I want to make that available.
I have a question for Joanne. Joanne, how did you go about finding and hiring a CEO mentor? Did someone connect you? Is it someone you already knew?
It was someone I didn't know, and I didn't hire him. My coach, I have a coach. Mm-hmm. She's affiliated with one of the universities in New York City, and she introduced me to this person. Turns out she's also his coach as well. And she felt that we would connect in both a personal way, but also in a professional way because of the similarities of our business. So she made the introduction, and he has opened doors for me and introduced me to Tony. So Tony, you know who it is now, and as well as others. And it's been a terrific relationship for both of us. And both of our businesses have also profited at the same time.
Great.
Any other questions between the panelists?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I said earlier, I'm a simple guy, and I don't like to overcomplicate things. And I just loved Joanne's sort of 3 rules that she had, and it's just simple, and it's common sense, and it makes a lot of sense. But we don't always get that. Just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate your businesses. It's just so easy to do that. And if you just abide by those simple rules that we can talk to our children about, it just transcends so many things and works so well in business.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to wrap things up and just make one more comment and then hand it over to Catherine. And the comment is, thank you, all of you. Paul, Lindsay, Tony, Greg, and Joanne. This has been absolutely wonderful, and I've learned a tremendous amount. Tony talked about getting better. This is one way I get better, is by talking with other business leaders, and it's been absolutely tremendous. I know I've got my team at Great Diamond Partners watching this, and I know that they have learned some things and probably picking out a few mistakes I've made in this. And just ending on a lighter note, Lindsay, I found it fascinating that ice cream is an essential business. And my daughter would absolutely agree, because Moose Tracks is absolutely required ice cream.
Thanks.
with that, Catherine, I'll hand it back to you.
Hi, thank you all so much. What a great discussion. Really, really appreciate all your help and your humor and your honesty. So thank you so much. Thank you to our sponsors too. We appreciate that. And Steve for leading us. I enjoyed the humor and the pieces back and forth. I have put the survey link in here. We are recording in the chat. We are recording the program, so we'll send that around to everyone. And we also look forward to having you join us for our succession program. Lindsay, you highlighted how important that is. So we do one every year, and it's 4 weeks from now, same time, same station, October 29th, from 8:30 to 10, and we'll have Hardy Pond Construction talking about their transition with Jim Lyman. So we hope that you all will join us, and have a great rest of your day, and thank you all so much for Zooming in with us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.